Darlene, thank you so much for joining us on Mental Health News Radio again.
Thank you very much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be able to share my information with your audience.
I agree. And your show, the last one that you did, we talked about one of your books, Codependency for Dummies. And that show is still getting downloaded at a rapid pace. I know we've emailed back and forth, and I saw that you had a new book that you had just published. Can you tell our listeners what the title of the book was?
I just published a couple. One is Freedom from Guilt and Blame, Finding Self-Forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And one that I think we're going to be talking about today is Dealing with a Narcissist. 8 Steps to Raise Your Self-Esteem and Set Boundaries with Difficult People. It's really applied to more than just narcissists.
Right, it does. I did read it a couple of times, actually, and there's a lot, of course, information out there about narcissism. This is a hot topic right now, I'm finding. Are you seeing that as well?
Yes, it is. And unfortunately, a lot of people bandy around the word, call anyone that they have trouble with a narcissist.
Right.
Or anyone they think is selfish a narcissist. But it's a specific clinical term. Not everyone is a narcissist that we don't like or that is rude or things like that. So, but there are narcissistic qualities that a lot of people share. So I think it's people that are really clinically considered narcissists is a very small percentage of the population. I think about 1 to 6%, and now people are starting to revise it down lower because they're questioning the studies that were done earlier that gave the higher number of closer to 5.5 or 6% because they were done mostly on college students. Researchers on campuses use the students as guinea pigs for their research. And at that age, young adults tend to be more narcissistic, just developmentally.
Right.
So it skewed the results.
That's true. I had an attorney on not too long ago that talked about divorcing a narcissist, and we, on our offline talk, he said, the concern here is that word is getting so overused, like you said, is just being applied as a label to anyone that, is acting out. And I always think, well, there are a lot of people out there that are going through a horrible time in their life. They're not on their best behavior, but that isn't, their natural state. They will evolve from that behavior and start, get back to behaving the way that they normally do.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So
divorcing a narcissist can be very, very stressful and traumatic.
Absolutely.
When it really is that.
When they're diagnosable, absolutely.
Yeah. Or someone with borderline personality disorder, either one.
So tell us what the myth is about narcissus.
Well, it's very apt to relationships, contemporary relationships, if you think of it metaphorically. It's a story about a handsome young hunter named Narcissus, and he was very beautiful, and he broke the hearts of a lot of women who were in love with him, and he remained very aloof and was full of pride and arrogance, and he just held them in disdain. All these women falling all over him. And meanwhile, there was a forest nymph named Echo, and she used to talk a lot, and she incurred the anger of the goddess Juno, who thought she talked too much. So she punished her by depriving her of free expression. And from then on, she could only repeat the last words of someone else. And she was in the forest, and Narcissus was hunting with his companions one day, and Echo saw him, and he was so handsome, she became infatuated with him, and she just longed for his attention, but she couldn't call out to him because she could only repeat the words of others. So one day, Narcissus became separated from his buddies, and he was wondering, is anyone there? And Echo, he'd hear a noise. He's looking for his friends. She could repeat that, And then finally he said, is some, come over here, says Narcissus. So she says, come here.
Mm-hmm.
So she rushes towards him. She's like jubilant. She's been watching him for this long time. And she reaches out to him, and he just spurns her and just say, get your hands off of me. I die before I let you enjoy my body. And she's like humiliated and rejected, and she flees in shame. And despite this, she watches him, and she just pines for him. And her love grows and grows, even though he shamed her and rejected her. And then there's another goddess, Nemesis. You've heard of the expression, someone your nemesis. Well,
Mm-hmm.
Nemesis was the goddess of revenge. And she saw this, and she decided to punish Narcissus. And she put a spell on him. And the next time he saw himself in a pool of water, he fell in love with his own reflection. At first, he didn't realize that it was himself. But he thought he had finally found someone who was worthy of his love. And he fell in love with his own image. And then after a while, it became clear to him that it was just his reflection. And so there's this unattainable object of his affection was himself. And eventually he committed suicide because he was just trapped in this horrible spell that was put on him. And Echo could never have her love fulfilled for him, and she became more and more obsessed with him and more depressed. And over the years, she lost her youth, her beauty, just pining away for him. And she just wasted away. And all that remained of her was, an echoing voice, and all that remained was of Narcissus was the flower that's named after him.
Hmm.
So it's poignant in that it's a story of two people that are yearning for love, but and that reflects a marriage sometimes or a
Yes.
relationship with narcissists, because they can't receive the love that their partner gives, and they end up pushing their partner away and finding fault with them, and they can't take it in. And the partner loves them, and they can't see that the narcissist is incapable of giving love, and they too keep trying to get the love from somebody who can't give it. And so they both play out this drama that usually is repeating their childhood, the pain and trauma of their childhood.
So that leads me into, what are some of the causes that you're aware of narcissism?
There's a few different theories. Kohut was the first to specialize and focus on narcissism, and he believed it was because of lack of maternal nurturing and empathic connection and mirroring, usually by the mother, or it could be early caretaker. There was insufficient modeling, and so the ability to empathize became stunted. And then later, Otto Kernberg went from there to emphasize the significance of parental aggression. So he thought it wasn't just lack of empathy, although he agreed, but he thought that there was actually aggression towards a child, harshness, criticism from a parent that stemmed from envy or indifference or hatred. The parent could have been domineering, manipulative, exploitive. And then there's another group, the social learning theorists, who argue that narcissism is caused by overindulgent parenting.
Right.
Teaching children to feel superior and entitled. My view is that there often is lacking mirroring too. So even if they're not abusive in the way that Kernberg would say, that there's still lacking in empathy. And then more recently, twin studies have revealed there's a genetic component, but those studies aren't conclusive. They're just in their infancy. right now.
Yeah, I saw this with two brothers, which I thought was fascinating. And they were maybe a year or two apart. And one was extremely empathetic, caring, loving. And the other brother was always found his brother fascinating, that he seemed to sense what someone was feeling, or and he kind of looked at his brother like he was some sort of strange being because he had normal human emotions. And this other brother was very disconnected, diagnosable in many people's opinions as with malignant narcissism. And that is the first time that I thought, watching this phenomenon, I thought, there could be something to the genetic component in this, since they were both raised by the same parents, and yet one was extremely caring and the other one was not. But, that's my non-clinical observation.
Were one of the parents a narcissist?
That I don't know. I do know that the one who, had no empathy for anyone, constantly had his mother fighting his battles for him and writing emails for him in business relationships and dealing with, he definitely screamed mommy issues. So I have no idea what, what that was actually about, and I didn't know the parents, but the father was definitely removed from the.
What was the age difference?
I think the age difference is either 1 or 2 years. It was interesting to see the completely different behavior, and to see the disdain from the non-empathetic brother that he had for his younger brother that did have feelings and was, considered a kind, compassionate human being.
Narcissists develop defenses that get in the way later in life, but they develop defenses to protect themselves from feeling vulnerable, so showing emotion. They would consider that the disdain you mentioned, where they would consider it a weakness.
Okay.
Any sign of vulnerability, and they idealize being self-sufficient and strong and not showing emotion, not showing vulnerability. To have power, they've decided that being powerful is how they're going to be safe. Usually the people they're involved with are the opposite.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. They tend to attract what they're lacking, but then they shame the people that they attract, and
because they shame, those are the zone parts of themselves.
Right.
So that the reverse is true also, is the one that they attract usually prefers a subordinate role, and they believe that pleasing others, they idealize love, and and being unselfish and showing attention, and that's how that they will feel safe, is by showing kindness and love towards people. So they may go to the extreme and sacrifice their own needs and self. So there's sort of mirror opposites.
Right. I've heard it called two sides of the same coin, the empath and the narcissist.
Exactly. And they idealize, they look up to what they consider maybe the narcissist's strength, their boldness, their anger even, because they repress or deny, or their own anger is shame-bound. And so they admire the narcissist's sense of direction or their charisma, and now they will just speak their mind. And these are things that they wouldn't do. They're more cautious, and some often might hide negative traits or hide their true feelings in order to not make waves. That's their motto, not to make waves. Their self-esteem gets boosted by being around a narcissist or of success. Some of the traits that they lack are their own competitiveness, leadership qualities, being authoritative. They don't usually like being in a supervisory role. So they will disown some of their more power-centered traits, whereas the narcissist will deny and disown their vulnerability and anything that they consider weakness. Being authentic opens them up to being judged as weak. So they seek to control people to get their needs met.
Right.
And avoid feeling vulnerable, no matter what. And then their partners don't want to make waves no matter what. So those are your two like opposite poles.
I've seen that an interesting dynamic where, possibly in the beginning of the relationship, the one partner was the more dynamic partner. I've seen this in a male-female relationship. They were the more successful one, but they married. When they got married, then over time, that dynamic, successful one became the bitter, more subservient one, and ended up, eventually giving up all their power to who was actually the narcissist in the relationship. So it seemed like this managing down over time of, of the one who, and to be honest, in that relationship, it's usually what I've seen is the narcissist is attracted to someone because they financially they have what the narcissist wants. They want, their access to money, or they want the the ability to look like they're normal by having this warm, caring person as their partner. But you slowly watch this person like a dying flower over the years because they're being zapped dry by the narcissist that they're involved with.
Well, one of the characteristics of narcissists is that they like to associate with people they think are special or high status.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's money or celebrity or power or an institution. They only want to go to the best doctor or have the best label, clothes, drive the best car, things that they consider are high status. That makes sense that they would want to also be attracted to somebody who has money.
Right. And then manage that down over time.
Well, because then they're competitive too.
Right.
They want to have the power. But also, many narcissists are very successful because of self-confidence and because their drive for powers and because they're competitive too. So some of their traits help them be successful in life.
Absolutely. So tell me about, we've talked a little bit about this, but I'd like to go in more depth around the relationship between codependency and narcissism. I used the word empath or empathic, but really, codependency is a much more familiar term.
I probably unique in the fact that I think that narcissists are also codependent.
Mm-hmm.
So I hesitate to say, though, the narcissist and the codependent. Empathy is not a core symptom of codependency. In fact,
right.
A lot of codependents aren't empathic at all. They do have different defenses than a narcissist. They might use people-pleasing as a defense. A lot of the codependent traits are defenses that they use. But they could share common symptoms of denial,
mm-hmm.
shame, dysfunctional communication, dysfunctional boundaries, control, and intimacy problems. And often there's depression, in the later stages, depression underneath. In my mind, they share a lot of the core symptoms, and they both need validation from outside themselves.
Right.
And that's the core of my definition of codependency is someone who can't access their core, their inner self, their innate feelings and needs, and instead their behavior revolves around another person, a process, or a substance. Narcissists are very much dependent on validation from others.
They are, and I definitely look at them like they're constantly recycling supply until that supply is completely used up. But they'll come back around if they think they can get any more ounce out of someone. They will until that person hopefully realizes what's going on and puts up a boundary of either low contact or no contact with that person, not allowing themselves to be a source of narcissistic supply any longer.
Yes, and there's some people who would think of just as a codependent that do to that too, that they're just clingy.
Right.
And they have an anxious attachment style, and they're like calling their boyfriend or girlfriend 20 times a day for reassurance.
Right, the inability to obtain that for yourself or to keep on an even emotional keel.
The one thing that I do notice a difference is that, but I don't see this as a core symptom of codependency, is that someone who's not a narcissist and codependent, not all codependents, but some will sacrifice themselves for the relationship or for someone else and try to, so I don't see narcissists doing that particularly, but I don't see that as they both use control, they both have shame issues from childhood. And actually, there was a research study that gave tests to identified codependents, and they scored high on a narcissism scale.
Interesting.
That didn't mean that they were clinically narcissists, but they did score high on that. And actually, narcissism exists on a continuum, not only from mild to severe, but there's such a thing as healthy narcissism. A lot of codependents don't have enough self-esteem, so they don't even have healthy narcissists. They need more narcissists.
And there's a lot of debate around that. I've had, I talked to so many behavioral health providers and many that, this is their entire practice revolves around working with narcissist abuse victims. And quite a number of them, have even called me out saying, there is no such thing as healthy narcissism. And I'm not, a clinician to be able to, give an opinion on that. But what are your thoughts around that? Because I hear that creeping up. There's no such thing. All narcissism is bad.
Well, it depends how they define their terms. If they're saying narcissism, meaning the clinical diagnosis of a narcissist, or they're using narcissism as how it was used by Freud, having a healthy amount of pride in oneself versus not having empathy for others. Narcissism was referred to as a stage, a developmental stage. And Kohut thought that you go from an immature primary narcissism, like in a toddler or infant stage where you're just aware of yourself, you don't see others, you can't have empathy or see others as having needs, you don't see your parents as separate people from you. They call that like archaic when you're very young, and that's primary narcissism. And I'm not a developmental therapist, so that's not my expertise, but eventually the child hopefully matures into the Oedipal phase. Then they learn about reciprocity and having a mutually reciprocal relationship. And then they continue, Kohut would say, you continue to mature this way throughout your lifetime. And that those who are unable to progress in their ability to love remain very highly sensitive to wounding, and this is your typical narcissist. Their relationships are unstable, and they have very destructive, immature, even like psychotic defenses, like borderline defenses. And they're not really grounded in external reality, so there's a lot of projection going on. But most people will fall somewhere in between. Only those who really mature, who then are able to idealize romantic partners and express their talents, their skills, accomplish their goals. And then there's people that fall in between their boundaries are unstable. They may be very defensive. You may see like very reactive, high conflict couples or people that can't have a long-term relationship. And so that might be someone in between, where they can't accomplish their goals. They don't have good self-esteem. So it takes a certain amount of healthy narcissism to be head of a company,
Right.
to run for an office, to be very successful in your goals. Oprah would be an example of a successful, healthy narcissism. So there are a lot of leaders can be empathic and thoughtful of others, and yet will set boundaries, will pursue their goals, won't sacrifice themselves for others.
Right. In a healthy way and have healthy boundaries. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I don't subscribe to the idea that there isn't such a thing as healthy narcissism. I definitely can see that there, in my own, reading about this, that there is healthy narcissism, but the very word is so charged that, many victims, just anything to do with that word, they don't want to subscribe the word health.
Well, it's funny. I had a dream in my recovery over the years from my own codependency. I had a dream years ago that I needed to be more narcissistic.
Interesting.
So,
I've thought about those things in my own, in my own behavior, my own codependent behavior with people, and giving way too much, giving the benefit of the doubt to the point of things harming me, especially in business relationships where I've just have every red flag, other people coming to me saying, what are you doing? This person is not someone you should be, just reaping all this gift of business onto. And, I've definitely learned from the unhealthy, diagnosable narcissists that I've been in business with how to absolutely pull up stakes and, lay down the gauntlet for me and walk away and just be concerned about my own needs, without heaping a huge amount of guilt on myself because someone is clearly not, falling short. I think the difference is, when someone has feelings around that, as opposed to a narcissist who's many times doing it to hurt another human being. They're enjoying setting up people for failure. They're enjoying watching someone's self-esteem be destroyed. That to me seems like, the major difference between the two.
Well, I don't know that they all enjoy. That might be someone who's cruel and does it out of a sadistic or malignant narcissist. There are a lot of narcissists who don't realize that's part of the problem. They don't realize the impact that they have an impact on others, because that can come from faulty parenting too. If a parent doesn't let you see the impact that you have on them when they don't respond to you that way, so they don't realize that what they're doing is they don't connect the dots, because others are just like objects. They don't see that they have an impact on others, that their words matter. They're just being defensive. They think they're protecting themselves, or they just think they're critical of someone else. They may not be doing it for fun. They may think this other person is in the wrong, or they need to change, or they're hurting me.
Yeah, I've seen that, and I've also watched just someone, and I guess this would, maybe push you into the malignant or psychopath realm, but someone who absolutely knows that they're hurting people and sets up scenarios to make it happen and takes absolute pleasure.
Oh, right. That would be, an extreme, but I don't think that's a majority of narcissists.
Right.
So, there are a lot of narcissists that care. When it's spelled out for them, they won't recognize it on their own, But when it's spelled out for them what they're doing and how it's impacting others, and what's key is, and I talk about this in my book, is that, and that it's going to benefit them. So even if it's not out of empathy, but in the long run, if they hurt their partner, then their partner isn't going to want to meet their needs either. And that's why I spend a lot, the chunk of the book is like communicating with a narcissist and how to go about that and plan it so that you can get your needs met. And you have to spell it out.
Mm-hmm.
This is a two-way street, and without criticizing a narcissist, because they're very sensitive to criticism, when you do this, it has a positive benefit for you. This is how I'm going to feel more loving towards you. I'll be more motivated to do what you want. I'm just giving these in broad strokes, but being very specific. And when you do this, I want to withdraw from you. I don't want to have sex with you. So you say
Right.
this is, so you're really teaching them like the impact of their behavior, the positive and the negative. And this is, and I feel more loving for you, with you. I want to spend more time with you. I'd be more willing to do the things you want to do when I feel that my needs, it has to work both ways. It's a two-way street.
And some are willing to, some people with high narcissistic tendencies are willing to make those changes. They see the benefit, even if it's self-serving. They see the benefit. They see the reaction to their changed behavior, and that motivates them to, continue. But many don't care. They don't think that they have a problem. They're not going to change no matter what. It's always someone else's fault. Completely treatment resistant.
That may be. That's why I say some you have to, and I give criteria in my book what to look for. And number one is to not have false hope or denial around what to expect.
Right.
And I don't say that to discourage people, but actually in order, I always talk about the 3 A's. It's not original with me. It actually, I think, comes from AA. Is awareness, acceptance, and action. So as long as you're living in denial and you think you're going to expecting some sort of empathic tenderness from somebody who hasn't ever shown you that, it's unlikely that it's going to change.
Right.
And the more but when you start accepting that, you think, well, what can, and actually maybe pointing it out repeatedly is making it less likely that you'll get it. Some partners of narcissists are critical of the narcissist, and it's working against them. So once you have more awareness of what's going on, and then you decide, well, but I want to stay in this relationship, either it's a parent or it's a relative that you don't want to eliminate from your life, or you can't because it's the father of your children, and maybe you're divorced and you still have to co-parent, or maybe you still love your partner or are staying because of your children or financial reason, whatever. You decide to stay, and then it's like, okay, so this is the reality, and what can I change? Well, I can change my reactions, and that makes a huge difference. So I've had clients where I only see the partner, the narcissist refuses to come together.
Yes.
And that's quite typical. They resist looking at themselves because of a lot of shame underneath, and they can only blame someone else. So I've seen someone come to me where the relation, in describing his partner, I thought it was like totally hopeless.
Right.
And in my own mind, I thought this person will see me in therapy and eventually leave. But that wasn't what my client wanted. My client loved his spouse and wanted to stay. And the relationship got better. It was like a miracle to me.
Wow.
By setting boundaries and not being placating all the time, and realizing the reality, the whole dynamics in the relationship changed.
Interesting. I have a funny story around that. I was working with a couple, and that we were colleagues, and I was having a horrible time dealing with the husband, as everyone did. And the wife called me one day, desperate. "You can't leave us. You can't leave our company. We really need you." And I said, "I can't. I refuse to work with him. I mean, I just won't do it. So I don't know how this is going to work. I don't need the stress, and I don't want to deal with him." And she said, "Well, I know this is going to make you sick to your stomach, but this is what I do. Every day when I wake up, I start praising him all morning. You're so wonderful. You're so handsome. You're so brilliant." And I just keep doing it for hours. And then he finally comes around at the end of the, towards the end of the day. And then he's nice to deal with. And I said, "You're right. That makes me sick to my stomach, and I will never do that."
Well, I would say to look for small signs of when you get what you want and compliment that.
Right.
Instead of pointing out what you don't want.
Right.
The number one rule is you don't want to get into a fight with the narcissist, because you lose every time. You're not going to get what you want. But it takes a while to know what you're dealing with, to be aware of your triggers, to not react, and change how you're dealing with this person.
Yeah, and you have to decide whether it's worth it. For me, in business relationships, it's not. So I extricate myself, but these are not people that I, have children with and have built a life with.
Right. So, for instance, I was counseling someone who was working with me about dealing with co-parenting, trying to frame things in terms of what the narcissist wanted. So the narcissist was complaining that the mother was too easy on the children. Meanwhile, he was being abusive with the children.
Mm.
So counseling her to say, you know what, you're right. We need to have better discipline of the children. And there was some truth to what he was saying too, because she was trying to compensate for
Right.
the father. So let's work out some rules, because I think it's really important that the children are disciplined. So she's kind of saying what he wants to hear. So she says, we need to be on the same page. So let's set up some rules, because I want to work with you. I think you're right. And what happened was he said, "Oh, you make up the rules." He just totally deferred to the mother in that. And then he would start to mix in, and she wanted to criticize him for that and say, "See, you're shaming the children, you're undermining, you're not being a good parent." And she was like pointing out all the faults. I said, no, you can't do that. They had a big fight, and of course then it's not going to be helpful. So instead, coaching to say, you know what, I know you want the children to respect me, and that I should be stronger with them, and I need your help. So the children really respect you. It would be really helpful if you tell them to listen to their mother. Never say, and I told her, you never say anything in front of the children, because he has to keep up his image.
Right.
It's not a good idea anyway to criticize one parent in front of the children. So to frame it all, rather than saying, she was going to say, "I talked to experts and you're doing it wrong," I said, no. You want to build him up and make him think that you want to carry out what he wants, and what he can do to help you meet his goals. So this probably sounds very manipulative, but this is, in the end, what was going to work for the two of them, so that he could support her in carrying out what he wants, rather than criticize him.
And again, I can see where you're already invested in a relationship. In those cases, if it's not horrendously abusive, we're not dealing with malignant narcissism as an example, then, those are the kinds of tools that can work if, both parties are willing to change their behavior.
Well, one of the things I point out is that if a lot of people are on the fence, I mean, it's not easy to leave a marriage, especially if you have children.
Mm-hmm.
So I say that my book can help people in the fact that they can get a clear understanding of what's going on, first
Mm-hmm.
of all. And secondly, they can try it and see if things improve.
Right.
So they know they at least tried, and then they can say, you know what? They can see whether things are working, are they getting better, are they not, if are changes happening, and then they'll be on more solid ground in making their decision and help them get over some ambivalence they have about whether to leave or whether to stay, and changing their own behavior. It will help them become more assertive. Even if they're having to divorce this narcissist, they will have gotten tremendous improvement in their skills, in having
Right.
to communicate. They're going to parent, if they have children, they're going to be parenting till those children are adults and after that. So it'll help them communicate better, even if they decide to leave.
Right. I thought it was such an excellent guide for these are the steps that you need to take. There's nothing fairy tale in it. Oh, if you do this, your relationship is going to be, wonderful. It was more, okay, really, let's get practical about what this is what you're dealing with, and this is how you're going to have to examine and make change in order to stay in this relationship or not be in this relationship where you're a partner. But if, like you said, you have children together, you're still in that relationship. So whether, you stay married or not. So I thought it was just such a good practical guide.
Well, thank you.
The last thing I want to cover before we close is many, high on the spectrum of narcissism, they do, things like that are written about all over, love bombing, portray themselves as, the partner you could absolutely want, or the friend, or the, the potential lover that you could, every possible dream you could ever want, and you fall for this this image of this person, and then once they've got you sort of hooked or bonded with them, then the mask comes off and you see the real person, and you as a codependent, spend or as just a person, you spend much of that relationship trying to get back to that idealized phase. And it's never, to me, it's like heroin. It's never as good as your first hit. Not that I ever did heroin, but that's what that's what I've heard. So in those cases, when you're dealing with that kind of a situation, how do you counsel people that, are dealing with the fallout of that? Where did this person go?
Okay, well, I think that happens in a lot of relationships, not just with the narcissist. There's a lot of idealization in romance, especially if someone is codependent and they're looking for love that's going to make them happy and solve their own depression.
Right.
There's healthy idealization too in a relationship when you're dating. I don't think it's unusual in the romance stage, but gradually you're able to integrate and accept a person, their shortcomings and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about now specifically where you think somebody has been seduced.
Yes.
And been misrepresented.
Yes.
Who they are. One research study showed they exposed a group of people to others who had been tested and diagnosed as clinically narcissistic, and non-narcissists met with the narcissist multiple times for about 20 minutes on each visit. And they really liked the narcissist in the beginning. It turned out it took roughly 7 encounters for them to see through the personality that was projected. A lot of people blame themselves. Well, how could I have been so stupid? But it's showing you that generally they're very good at projecting the image because they want that validation. They need that affirmation and attention from people, so they're very good at knowing how to be appropriate, to manipulate, to get that positive feedback.
Right.
But over time, especially in an intimate relationship, you start to see that they're controlling, that they start to put down other people a lot, and they get critical, and they are maybe seeking perfection. They can't manage their anger. Maybe they are insulting to a waiter or a driver or a bellhop or something. Their anger starts to leak out, and they may be very seductive. So these are some warning signs that they won't compromise. Things are about, they talk more about themselves or to try to get their needs met and don't want to compromise. And then after they're in a relationship, I mean, that it gets back down to, do they want to stay, or are they going to start to ask for what they want and need, and how is their partner going to respond? I'm not sure if I answered your question. I'm a little unclear.
Yeah, you did. I just, in my work in, the corporate world, I've been a consultant for 25 plus years. So I've been in and out of thousands of businesses at this point. So I always look at it from that business perspective, and I see what I call the dog and pony show with several CEOs or upper level managers. And, I worked in mom and pop shops all the way up to Fortune 1000 companies. And I could see just sort of the same patterns of behavior with among staff, but more so among people in leadership positions, where they loved the adulation that they could get, from someone in a lower position than they were in, and just using flattery and sugary sweetness and telling this person everything they wanted to, this person could ever dream of hearing. And then over time, this person being managed down, treated poorly, talked horrendously, set up to fail. And I noticed it, over this course of 25 years, watching how much damage that did in workplaces. And then, of course, I've noticed it in personal relationships too. But in the workplace, thinking that you've just found the best boss you've ever, you could ever imagine, the most wonderful, amazing person you could ever work for. And then over time seeing, oh, that is not at all who I first met when I started, working at this company. Like you said, seeing how they treat other employees, seeing how they treat the waiter at a restaurant if you go to a lunch with the boss, or, something of that nature. So that's kind of where I was going with that, and how people can deal with that, because it is very damaging to your self-esteem to be around someone that behaves that way.
Yes, and it's difficult if it's your boss. You don't have a lot of leverage.
Exactly.
If it's a coworker, there's things you can do, but when it's your boss, it's very difficult. I wanted to say one thing about healthy narcissism that occurred to me after we moved on, and that is that if you think about what we said, that the partner and the narcissist are two sides, flip sides of a coin, and they're attracting the disowned parts of themselves. So a person that has healthy narcissism is whole. So they combine the best of both. In other
Interesting.
words, they don't have low self-esteem and shame issues and self-sacrificing and lack of assertiveness that somebody who is, to say, a codependent that hasn't been in recovery. And they don't have the self-centeredness and the lack of empathy and the grandiosity, not living in reality, and the sense of entitlement that the narcissist has. They're not responding from shame, and that's the core feature. And I write a lot about this in my book on conquering shame and codependency. I write about the different types, like the accommodator I talk about and the master, and they often are in relationship together. But
Yes.
underneath is this shame.
On
So
both
bond.
sides. Yeah, that's the bond. Exactly. I read that. I've read everything you've written, and I remember that as well. Lots of great insight into myself and my own behavior. Well,
I learned a lot about myself writing them.
Writing them, I bet. Well, we're coming down to the hour marks, so I want to make sure that everyone knows where they can find your books, how they can reach you, if you don't mind sharing that with our audience.
Oh, I'd love to. Thank you. Well, I have on my website are links to everything. So my website is whatiscodependency.com, and there's a tab there for my books, and there's a tab for seminars where you can listen to some audio recordings. There's a link on my homepage to my YouTube channel where there's some talks, and a link to my Facebook page and my Twitter account. So I post daily on Facebook and Twitter. My Facebook page is Codependency Recovery, but again, you can get there from my website. And my books are all on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and on my website. My paperbacks you can only get at Barnes & Noble and Amazon, but my ebooks are available there as well as my website, and also on smashwords.com where they have a downloadable for Apple and Kobe and some other types of devices.
Okay.
And should I name my books?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So my first one was Codependency for Dummies, followed by Conquering Shame and Codependency, 8 Steps to Freeing the True You. And then I have 6 ebooks. So the one we talked about today is Dealing with a Narcissist, 8 Steps to Raise Self-Esteem and Set Boundaries with Difficult People, 10 Steps to Self-Esteem, which is, I call it the ultimate guide to overcoming self-criticism, and How to Speak Your Mind, Become Assertive and Set Limits. And I mentioned a new one, Freedom from Guilt and Blame, Find Self-Forgiveness. And then I have a daily reader called Codependency Recovery, Daily Reflections. And for those of you who are listening who are involved with 12-step programs, I've written an ebook. All my ebooks are workbooks too. So there's tons of exercises and how to do things. And this is Spiritual Transformation in the 12 Steps. So it's a guide to working the steps from a Jungian and psycho-spiritual point of view.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you, Darlene, again for coming on the show. Like I said, the first one that you were on, we still have people rapidly downloading that show. So I imagine this one will go in the same vein.
Well, thank you so much, Kristen. It's just been a real delight to talk to you, and I really love talking about this material and hope that more and more people can benefit from my work.
Absolutely. And I want to thank our listeners. Thank you again for joining us on Mental Health News Radio.